Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our session on legacy and wealth management for founders in your first 5 years of business. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm the Director of High Growth Impact Entrepreneurs and Head of Sponsorships here at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit improving access and knowledge in entrepreneurship to advance economic progress for all. As you're going to see in the chat in just a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to help entrepreneurs feel prosperity, no matter where their journey begins. Be sure to check out those links and resources in the chat. Now we're going to launch a few polls to take a step back and take a temperature gauge on how all of you are doing today. We use this information to guide the programs we provide for this global community of entrepreneurs. The first one, how are you feeling about your business? Are you optimistic? In survival mode? Let us know. And thank you for voting. Also, through these polls, if there are any specific topics or challenges you'd like us to create resources for, feel free to share them in the chat as well. We'll do our best to get to them all. Now, just a couple more housekeeping items before we get started. If you're comfortable, let us know where you're dialing in from by dropping it into the chat. We'd love to see where everyone's joining us from today. See if you have any neighbors. Also, we're going to be having a live Q&A at the end of this session, so please feel free to submit those questions for us at any time using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can. All right, let's see where people are dialing in from. SF Bay Area, Los Angeles, welcome. South Florida, Chicago, Atlanta, New York City, Concord, love it. La La Land, love it. Brooklyn, SF Bay Area, Delaware, Chicago. Big mix here, Oakland, love it. Thank you for letting us know. Looks like we've got a big mix of time zones. And while you're answering, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the incredible support of our corporate partners. The work we do here at the center wouldn't be possible without all the generosity and belief of our partners and funders, including NASDAQ, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, KPMG, Walmart, the Asia Innovation Hub, Wilson Sonsini, the Nareed Foundation, KKR, and BPM. We're deeply grateful for their partnership and hope you'll join us in sharing that appreciation as well. All right, well, this final poll is good news for our speakers. The top answer is finance, and we are going to be covering a decent amount on that today. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome in the chat to our special guest moderator and CEO and Executive Director at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center, Nicola Corzine. Nicola, so good to see you.
Oh, it is great to be here always. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Colin, thanks for those wonderful comments to get us started. I am really excited to be here holding this conversation today on a topic that often feels like it comes a day late and a dollar short. All the puns intended. What do I mean by that? Legacy planning, wealth creation, something that often founders sort of sit with and say, well, that's something I'm really looking forward to dealing with when I've made it. And it's that Broadway moment of when does the make it feel real? Is it my exit? Is it when I have that shiny IPO moment when I hit that massive B at the end of the valuation number? And the reality of what we're going to talk about today is actually it starts much, much earlier. It starts by giving you a superpower and a supercharge on many ways, on the hardest of days, to get up, knowing that the reason that you're building, the goals for generational wealth, for your financial certainty, for your employees' financial certainty, matters materially. And that even though this marathon that we're on called entrepreneurship may take a little bit of time, there are things we can start doing today to not have it be something that feels so far-fetched and something that we can't start working on. So just to anchor us back to how we're going to get there, we are going to be looking today at ensuring that you walk away confidently grounded, that you can materially grow your personal finances, that you can strengthen and optimize your business, and that this will lead to better long-term outcomes for you, your family, and your community by prioritizing your wealth far earlier than later. And the good news is, I am surrounded by three incredible leaders, experts, knowledge friends who are going to help guide us through this and really break down a lot of those barriers or imposter moments of going, how am I going to start to make a difference and a dent in this reality that I want to see for myself and for all those I love and for the community that I live in? So I hope you'll join me in giving a very virtual, warm welcome to our incredible talent today. I'm going to start by introducing Cindy Willard. She's the Senior Director, Capital Activation for Impact Charitable. Cindy, welcome. It's great to have you. We have Steve McConley joining us. He's a wealth management leader at Wells Fargo. Steve, so good to see you today. Thanks for being here. And Edmund Zhao, tax leader at BPM. So rather than not do justice to the amazing backgrounds that each of you have, we're going to go round robin to start with, and I'm going to ask this opening question to you. Why do you care about wealth management for entrepreneurs? And how do we flip the script to really make it such that we can have this conversation while founders are still early? Why do you care about that topic? So, Steve, I'm going to start with you. Then we're going to go to Cindy, and then Edmund, you're going to round us out. Steve, again,
Excellent.
welcome. Good to have you.
Thank, thank you very much. So yeah, my role at Wells Fargo is a business owner advisory strategist. So my job every day is just to give advice to business owners. And I chose that job, or I took this job because it's a population that I really like helping. And I decided, or I learned in my career that I enjoy helping people throughout. Like helping as many people as I can, and having an impact early on is very rewarding. So I've been at Wells going on 29 years. Investment banking background, corporate development background, but now I describe myself as the retired investment banker. That's the next door neighbor to the business owner, where we just talk about what it is they want to accomplish and how best to help them accomplish those goals.
Amazing. I love that. Well, we're so glad that you are here guiding us on this conversation today and that you're our next door neighbor where we can get this friendly advice from. Cindy, welcome. Lovely to have you. Tell us a little bit about your amazing background and what brings you excited to talk about this conversation today.
Great. Thank you, Nicola. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you. I love spaces with entrepreneurial energy, so I'm thrilled to be here today. Impact Charitable is, we are an intermediary working in the impact sector. So trying to create positive change for people on planet using financial resources to do that across the spectrum of all of the things that are possible, from grants to impact investing. I think one of the reasons that wealth management matters so much for entrepreneurs is that these are the folks with the new energy and the new ideas who are helping us build the future. And I think that energy and those ideas and that enthusiasm is really what we need to combat some of these issues that are feeling intractable, but nothing is. We've built all of this so we can build new things and build better. And so I really think that as all of you are thinking about our new ways of working and being and doing things, that this group is really well positioned to provide some of those larger solutions, and wealth management can help position us all to be more effective in that space and to bring all of our resources to bear on these issues. So glad to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cindy. Edmund, welcome. I'm absolutely loving the photographs that are hanging from your wall. I think of wealth management and I wish I was on a beach right now. Tell me a little bit about your background and why you're excited to be here today.
Thank you, Nicola, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today. So my entire career is in tax, very focused on tax. I've been working with venture capital, private equity fund, et cetera, and now more on the founder side, helping individual levels in their business. So it's really great to see from early on how we can help the founders alleviate some of their stress with finance, tax, because we really want them to focus their time on building their business, developing their product, so we can take a lot of those planning off them in terms of finance and tax and see them grow 4 or 5 years later when they have success and exit. And we were along the whole way and help them plan tax efficient structures and exit strategy. So it's really satisfying when we kind of all grow up together in a way that see success at the end.
Love that. As are we. And you can frame it better really for the start of the conversation. And friends, for those of you just joining, again, welcome. We're going to be holding a conversation for about 40 minutes, but please, all of us here want to make this as personalized to you as possible. So feel free to pop those questions into the Q&A function and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can as we're talking today. But the center focuses really on the first 5 years of business. And interestingly enough, some of the earlier research that we did looking at many of our entrepreneurs found that there was a closer proximity to speed to cash flow break even that actually came from when founders put themselves on the balance sheet. When they actually started paying themselves, it became a magnifier effect for speed and financial growth and financial health, which is wonderful to note. And I think somewhat a little contrarian. So, Steve, I want to start by really coming to you and addressing this. I'll just think about this later. Does it make me less of an entrepreneur if I start with the end in mind and really trying to get my financial health of myself and those that I care about in order? What do you think is so critical that happens in those first 5 years? How do we set a healthy foundation? And any mechanical advice that you'd offer to start with that end in mind?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think it's absolutely incumbent on an owner, in my opinion, to have an idea of where they're going. I talk to most business owners and they live life in the left lane. And unfortunately, I've talked to many that have passed their exits. They haven't developed the teams to allow themselves to decentralize the business relies on them completely. And I described it. They're the only stake or the only post in the tent, and when they leave, it will collapse. And nobody wants that to happen, whether it's the legacy of the business, the employees, the customers. So I think thinking of what you want to do with the business eventually and what you like the business to do for you, so the business doesn't own you as much as you own the business, that is critical. And you really should start with a bit of the end in mind. That doesn't mean you're always focused on the horizon. Of course, you have to be successful in the day-to-day execution of the business. But to me, understanding what your overall goals and objectives are at a really high level is this something where I want to get the business to my employees? Whether it's through an ESOP or a management buyout, is there some community element that I feel really important? I've talked to some owners that have large businesses in small towns, and they feel the weight of that. And how can we perpetuate this company so that it is always the resource for this community? Defining some of those things and keeping those in mind can really help an owner early on understand, they don't always have to be looking at the goal, but they shouldn't put too many obstacles between them and where they want to go. And they can have the right capital structure, the right team in place, with the idea of the exit is, again, it's not necessarily what you're focusing on day to day, but you don't want to put obstacles between you and your goals.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. And Steve, just maybe to go a little bit tactical for a moment, what is generally speaking the guide that you would offer for how long it may take to actually get ready to exit a business? In other words, what is that timeline to keep in mind of really getting everything ready? And certainly anything that you would advise founders not to do from a structure perspective or just,
Yeah.
getting struggled on that piece of it.
Multiple years. Selling, if you want to sell your business, if you're going to hire somebody to sell, whether it's an investment banker or business broker, those folks will take a year to get a transaction, most of a year of a transaction to get a transaction closed. It's not like selling a house. It's a living, breathing entity. But what takes the most time is the preparation ahead of time. So again, if this business is completely reliant on me, that's not a saleable business. That's not maybe even a transferable business because I don't have a business. I have a support staff. So, building that management team and allowing some of those key people to take on some of those responsibilities, that can take years. And other things, and not to get into Edmund's lane, but from a tax perspective, thinking through, C Corp, S Corp, and you want to be in the safe harbor period if you're an S Corp, but if you're a C Corp, you want to do 1202. So there's some tax things that can take years to really fully implement. And you want time to be your ally, not your enemy. So thinking about some of those things ahead of time, review them at least annually, and then exploit, and I mean that in the kindest possible way, your advisory team, whether it's your CPA, if you're going to sell your business, you should be talking to brokers and investment bankers years in advance. to help get their advice on what you can do between now and when you intend to transact so that you can have the best possible outcome.
I love that. And here's always looking for allies, definitely more than enemies when it comes to time challenges for poor founders who have so much on their plate every single day. Um, Edmund, I feel like Steve just teed you up perfectly for this question that was coming over to your way anyway. But when you think about the dynamics of how founders set up and structure their companies from a tax perspective, what guidance would you offer relative to the end in mind as we're talking about today? And also if there's anything where it's very costly to try to unwind these types of things, later towards the end of when the business is hoping to exit.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for the lead way and Nicole, the question. I totally agree, like what Steve said. When we're in the early stage, we got to understand what's your goal and what's your exit eventually, because that will help you tee up what kind of structure for the tax purpose. In a lot of these startup, I mean, almost often we're looking at fundraising and exit, and a lot of it is involving venture capital style of fundraising. So when in such a thing like that, the most recommended structure is the C Corp because only C Corp really uh, provides something what we call qualified small business stocks, which is what Steve mentioned as Section 1202, which is really give you a capital gain exclusion once your business exit, and of course their holding period is the time frame that he mentioned. Um, Again, this is really essential, depends on your goal and objective down the line. And once we get the entity structure set up, then now we're looking at how's that going to impact me and my investors, right? So the really good thing is really set all the sort of administrative up correctly, like your founder equity, right? What's that mean? How's that cap table looks like? Make sure those all clean. Everybody had an understanding. And then on your personal space, when you have, equity, founder equity, a lot of time we talk about a Section 83B election, which means if your equity is subject to risk of forfeiture or restriction, you can file 83B election to recognizing those income early on at the transfer. And then you're recognizing a low fair market value because your startup just starting. So, you pick up a low income then and let it grow. And when you exit, it's become a capital gain versus ordinary income. If you don't have such an election in place as you let it lapse in investing, those become ordinary income to you. And what nice thing also about it is actually kickstart your qualified small business stock clock. Because remember, we said there's a holding period. The old rule is 5 year. With the new rule, with the one big beautiful bill, is like there's partial 3 year exit, 4 year, 5 year. Of course, you get a 50%, 75% to 100% exclusion based on those years. Another thing is have early on conversations with your founders, like what's the exit looks like. If one investor jumping in, what does that mean? If one founder decide to move on, what does that all mean? Because all those sort of costly, now go to the costly side. If you don't have those in place, it could be a very bad breakup. It could be, killing the foundation, the structure, or if you miss the 83B election, like I said, instead of recognizing capital gain income over time, you're going to recognizing ordinary income, and you're also missing out on the QSBS election as well. So things like that would be very costly, and sometimes you can't even go back and unwind it because they all have a time frame to it.
Mm, mm. So another good reason why, as Steve's advice of like have friends and advisors around you who can kind of help you keep track of these deadlines that can feel like a lot of moving parts and pieces when you're trying to grow and build a business, which absolutely makes sense. But we want you keeping as much capital around you and as much ownership around you to realize the investment that you've been making over the years with the heart and the soul that you're putting into these businesses. Thanks for that, Edmund. Speaking of heart and soul, Cindy, I want to come to you because you have this wonderful and unique position of working both with entrepreneurs and philanthropists. And over the time, I realized actually, in many ways, it's two sides of the same coin because for a lot of our entrepreneurs, they're building not only for financial wealth, but they're building for mission and purpose. In fact, whether it's our milestone makers, incredible entrepreneurs who are literally unlocking social impact across the globe, or even our Main Street entrepreneurs in America, many of whom are starting nonprofits at the same time that they're starting their business. This idea of purpose really guides them forward. because purpose and values are so important to our entrepreneurs, how do you find that aligned when we start entering this really complex conversation around what is a good exit for me? Because it's such a personalized thing when we think about that. And it can feel like it's a step too far to understand how the desires and values of an individual can have an effect on the actual outcome and the exit at the end of the day. What's your guidance? What's your thoughts to entrepreneurs as they struggle with this?
Yeah, it is a big question. And I think it's something that as humans, we all deal with all the time. So, what we value and who we are, these things are rarely separated from our work lives. So all of that is going to show up in you as a leader, in your business, in all of those pieces. And so, years ago when I worked in corporate social responsibility, we had a lot of older folks who would say, well, now I'm giving back. And I always thought, well, what did you take that you don't have to give back for? It was sort of this interesting question in my mind. And I think, happily, we've seen folks shift to be like, I'm going to give and participate the whole time instead of waiting. Sort of the conversation we had earlier too, like, don't wait. Like, now is your moment. Like, engage, be active. There are lots of things you can do, some of which are going to require financial resources and some of which aren't. All businesses have impact, and that can be intentional or happenstance, whether you're an impact focused business or a business that's doing lots of things. Your work will impact your employees, your community, your supply chain, the environment, all of those things. And so I think one of the things that I've encouraged folks to think about is how do you kind of earn your license to operate? And again, that isn't necessarily something you can do with monetary values, but how are you engaging with your employees and the things they care about? How are you supporting your community so that they are going to be really excited when you want to expand and build more proper, right? How do you sort of create the environment that works for you and works for them, right? Because we know that the best relationships are reciprocal. And so as you are growing and earning and moving forward, the more you can help your ecosystem and your stakeholders think about that as well, I think is really important. We also know that building teams, when people have mission and meaning and purpose in their work, makes them better employees, which can help grow your business. And that will make you more wealthy, both on the financial side and on the personal fulfillment side. And so I always think about wealth in a number of realms, right? And part of that is financial, which is really important. And being comfortable and building that wealth generationally for families is really important. And what are the other wealth pieces that you can think about? And that's where I think philanthropy and entrepreneurship can intersect in really beautiful ways, and how we think about building those pieces at the same time. Regardless of what your business is, I think those opportunities exist.
I love that. I love that. And I think feeling that there is a sense of what you can control even as you're building, and the relationships that you're investing into is everything. One of the smart things that I heard a long, long time ago that's really stuck with me is, even though it often feels like all of the power may live on the other party's side, due diligence is a two-way street. And so as you're getting to know relationships of people that may either buy your company, or you're looking at succession planning within your company, what you're really looking for is that trust and that confidence that a lot of the heart that you're investing into the business is going to be carried forward. That longitudinal evaluation of like, this is where I want it to be, and this is how my values are showing up, and they match the values of sort of the next stage of growth. And I think that next stage of growth, Edmund, is another interesting thing that I want to double click a little bit with you on. The capital, whether it's founder's stock, whether it's options, whether it's all of the things, can feel so complicated to an entrepreneur when they're setting things up. And it feels like, well, I read something on this, and so I guess I take all of it up front, and they're not necessarily thinking with that end result in mind. How do you consider the timing of capital, the who that brings in outside finance, and the relationship of the money into the business as having a material effect on what happens at the exit? Because I think transactionally, they're often siloed. And today I want to bring them together, because I think, we need to look at the whole, because when you do take in outside capital, obviously it's no longer just your business. So for our founders and friends in the room who are thinking about that strategy, or maybe have taken that strategy, what does exit mean when it comes to outside capital? And what are the implications for founders when they go through that process?
Thank you, Nicola. Again, when we're looking at exit, we always kind of look back at the beginning, like what's our goal and objective, because a lot of exits is treated differently based on the entity that you have, the entity type, right? So as we commonly talk about, we talk about exit a lot of times IPO, or we get acquired by a VC fund or other company. So a lot of time we're looking at two type of entity. One is a corporate or pass through, right? If you're also contributing something other than your time, like a valuable asset, like a IP or other type of asset, you want to put it into this new structure of business, we got to look at, is that a non-recognition event? So meaning if I put something value in there that to pay the tax or the gain on the item I'm putting in, or this can be deferred or become non-recognized. So in that effect, the type of entity matters a lot as well. But with a C corp, typically when you put in something like that, and control of the C corp is a non-recognition, so the asset can put in can live in the corporation tax defer. And also, I said a C corp is a common here because a lot of investor coming in, when they look at capital, C corp is much more desired because they can get the qualified small business exclusion on the gain down the line, and then also much easier for them to just buy into the shares of the company, and it's easier for the original shareholder to restructure their capital accounts and things like that in a tax-free transactions. It also means that in terms of your own capital, remember I said about 83B election earlier, those are really cool because those are really the essence of recognizing ordinary income when the value of your entity or your capital is low, and let it appreciate. And when you sell, it becomes a capital gain item and paying at the lower tax rate. So those are really key to terms in terms of timing. You have to make the election timely. If you miss that, there's no way going back to it. Another thing is it also start a clock for our what we call qualified small business as well. Even also give opportunity, even if you have to sell your business or exit early, you can retain the QSBS function of these shares or security by investing and rolling over to a new QSBS, a qualified small business as well. So your timeline can continue. So in terms of capital and timeline and structure, those are all intertwine each other because each of them impact each other. First of all, based on what structure, equate what type of capital you have. Depends on what type of capital you have, there are timely election that you have to make to make it a more tax efficient down the line. And then when you exit, depends on the type of entity or capital you're holding, what's that tax event looks like. So all those are intertwined, and all those kind of start early on the planning stage that we need to pay attention to.
We had a wonderful question come in from, and hopefully I'm not mispronouncing the name, Bella Gabriella. And we often hear this from our founders, and it's like, it's a little bit cheaper. We all understand that to start as an LLC. Is it okay for me to start there and then flip to a C corp once I'm really, aiming to sort of take an outside capital or really grow and scale the business? What has been your experience as founders transition structure? Because I do want to be honest and say it's not like it's rigid. There are moments where there is fluidity to structure opportunities, costly and timely as it may be. So can you walk us through from a tax perspective what your experience has been in observations relating to changing structure and any time sensitivity that we should be aware of as to when it can be done or maybe shouldn't be done, depending on how you want to answer that?
Well, LLC is the type of common structure to start off, and it is the easiest is to form, and it is also very cheaper to maintain as a C corp. The really only difference here is the QSBS clock doesn't start until you have a C corp stock. So even your whole LLC from year 1 to year 4, and then you convert to a C corp at year 4, and you exit at year 5. In essence, in your mind, okay, I have this business for 5 years now. That should be qualified QSBS. But under the QSBS law is no, year 1 to year 4, you still LLC. So those holdings don't qualify for QSBS clock. Only when you convert to C corp on year 4. So 4 to 5 is only 1 year holding, so you're failing even under the new rule, 3-year holding period. So you can convert any time, but the QSBS doesn't start until you convert to C corp. And even after you sometimes, okay, I'm holding for 1 year, but I want to continue invest in another C Corp that is also QSBS, then you can invest and roll over those to continue the clock. But the main difference, the LC time doesn't count toward the QSBS. And which is, to a lot of people, investor purposes, is a costly time to lose out on the tax.
Yeah, exactly.
And one thing I would
Yeah,
add on
please.
that, another
Yeah.
thing that's really important is to try to you have to understand the nature of your business, because some businesses will be inherently more valuable if you're going to sell to a third party, to a buyer as an asset sale. And then if you're a C Corp with an asset sale, that's problematic, because that's kind of the worst tax situation. I don't want to, but when I was selling companies, like I sold a trucking company, very capital intensive, lots of depreciation. If that was an asset sale, that was potentially catastrophic. So you really do need to understand, is this a capital intensive business where the buyer's going to pay me 30-40% more because of the value just from a tax perspective? Amortizing or depreciating their fixed assets, amortizing the premium, versus are they going to be amenable to a stock sale? So that planning needs to start early on, in years, to your earlier question, before you think you're going to transact.
Oh, I love that, Steve. It's so wise. And I'm going to stay with you because I think that the complexity of how one is growing the business, the type of business and industry that it is, and then the exit potentials, it feels like there's more choices in front of us than ever before of sorts, as far as like how might I exit my business. But obviously you work deeply with a wide range of different leaders within inside of Wells Fargo. And you've seen very much how like that personal connection to how they're approaching generational wealth is driving their business forward. So I've got a two-part question for you. One is, what do you think that founders forget to prioritize when it comes to their own sort of capital investment that's being made in the business? And secondarily, when you look at the exits that are aligned to these founders, what's the effect that it's had on like their overall wealth creation during that time period? Short story long, I think a lot of founders forget the investment that they've made of their time over the course of the business, and they hope to catch it up at the end. In your experience, does that often happen? And how might it better happen as they're trying to, honestly, up intake their overall wealth creation over the duration of being a business owner?
So I think I'll answer the last part first, and that is, it's really important for a business owner to know themselves. And there's a lot of folks that I've talked to that are destined to die in the office. And I don't mean that to be like overly dramatic or morbid, but they will lose their part of what they perceive as their function in the world when the passion, this isn't a job to them, this is a passion, very often with business owners. So what I see people ignore the most often is, what do I want my, next chapter to be? Because it's the end of a chapter. It's not the end of your life. It's, if you're going to transition the ownership of your business, what do I want that next chapter to be? And really flesh that out. Because I tell folks, particularly if they're going to be selling their business, if they're looking back 30 years from now, what will define success will be probably more qualitative than quantitative. And is this the right transition for my business? And it was brought up earlier, if sharing that vision and the values with your employees before you're putting yourself on the market, right? Be open and communicative with your team. You can use that to draw in people, maintain your staff, or retain your staff, and grow your staff, and have that vision and values be part of everything that you do. And do the same with yourself. Understand your own perspective on what you want for this, and you can die in the office. Just don't have the business die in the same day, right? Have that team around it, and have the role that you want to have. If it's a management transition and you're going to get it to some collection of employees, or if you're getting it to your kids, that's fine. But definitely have a plan around what happens when I'm not there, and how can I gracefully step back, because trees don't grow in the shade very well. The other thing that I'd say is be very honest with those folks that you think might be the next leaders of the company or the next owners of the company. If it's your managers, have a candid conversation where the only wrong answer is an insincere one. Do you really explain the benefits of the business, but also the risks? Maybe they have to personally guarantee the line to the bank. And the same thing with the next generation. Very often they can say what mom or dad wants them to say, as opposed to, what when mom and dad are no longer there, their true desires will play out. So have that conversation, give them the license to give a sincere answer. And then as an owner, you can make the best decision about what to do with the company with the best facts at hand. And they're the real facts. They're not just the facts that everybody thought you wanted to know.
Mm. Steve, I absolutely love that framing of the next chapter. Because I think we all know that to a certain degree when we quote unquote sell the business isn't ended. Even if you IPO, it's not done. It's just a different style of work and a different strategy that you're unfolding. And the same goes for our founders. It's not the end. Now they get their next chapter. And that's just a really freeing and wonderful place. And Cindy, to come to you, I think in that same vein that we talked about earlier, maybe this is where those values get to kind of show up. So I guess I'd ask you the same question of sorts, like knowing and having clarity around values and what drives founders forward. How does that help them sort of embrace a next chapter? And when do they start thinking about that next chapter that they do want to embrace?
Yeah, I do think that those values and the meaning and mission that you build into your work can help lead you to the next thing. So thank you, Steve, for teeing that up for me. I think it allows you to be creative, to understand the ecosystem within which you work, which might lead you to your next interesting opportunity. It might lead you to the next stage of growth for a business. So I think being connected and knowing that your business and your work is one part of a larger body of work. We can't all do everything. And so being good at what you do, right, is part of being an entrepreneur and part of what will make you financially successful, right? And having some of that same discipline around your community investment, right? Your clarity and purpose. You're going to have to say no to some things. We all do. We may not love it, but it's important. And so the things you do say yes to, how do you engage with folks who are saying yes to different things that come alongside you to do this? And I think even in the early stages of your business, thinking about that community investment, whether it's your time to be engaged with those folks, whether it is some monetary contributions can be helpful, but understanding where you are in that larger picture, I think can bring benefits to your business and to your future growth trajectory as a person, right? We're all whole people. And so as we think about integrating our own missions and our own visions, having that play out is going to be really, really helpful. And so think about where you are, what you are best at, and find those people who are good at other things. And I think those are some interesting spaces where, again, community investment and engaging in that way can be really helpful to you as a business person and as just a person.
I love that. And helpful and healthy. I would advocate probably for our founders that are able to save a little bit of time and make this investment earlier on. They're going to feel full. They're going to feel able to go the distance. They're going to see that clarity of the work that they're doing in different ways, which is obviously why we get up every day and pursue the entrepreneurial challenge that lies in front of us in the biggest and hardest of ways. Okay, now I feel like we've already started to tackle this which is like, okay, but what do I do now? And I'm seeing some really good questions pop up even in the chat around, okay, but what do I do? What do I start documenting today to get to that endpoint? How do I keep going the distance? So we're going to switch gears a little bit and spend a few minutes now looking at what can we do now? What can we invest in now? What can we see now to help us plan for the future differently or perhaps even on a stronger footing than we might otherwise be feeling weak around? So Steve, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah.
What do you think is one early financial move that founders can make that can create optionality for them relative to their exit and resilience without slowing down momentum of the growth of their business or taking their eye off of that very important prize?
To me, and it's going to be a little bit counter because it's going to incur expenses, but it's maybe building your team internally in the business. I'm generally talking to the biggest risk of the business when I talk to the owner, and I'm usually not usually, but very often talking to the binding constraint of the business. So to me, knowing when you can bring in additional resources that can, as Cindy said, augment what you do, but also have an eye to how can I continue to grow this and be bringing in additional resources, whether it's human capital or other types of capital to really scale the business. Because when there is a transition, the monetary value is going to be based on its income statement, right? Unless you're talking intellectual property. So you do want to make sure that you can have the scale to execute. And to do that, you need to have the machine, the people, the resources, the systems in place to accomplish that. So I think knowing when you can do that does two things. It makes going to work a lot more fun because you're not the only one spinning the plates. And secondly, it allows you to celebrate with that team and grow with that team and help the culture of the business that you have.
Absolutely love that. And I think that, again, back to your earlier wisdom on it doesn't happen overnight. Succession planning is not something that you want to come in at the 11th hour and think, okay, who's my number two? Let's get them there because I really want to sell in the next 12 months. I mean, this is something that you want to be thoughtful and have a partnership and a collaboration with on those team members. So, and even thinking of then who's supporting those team members. So it's a really thoughtful process. Very wise advice. Thank you. Edmund, tax decisions. Now getting very squarely focused on years 1 through 3, when quite honestly, a lot of the times, income is modest. Let's be very honest. Revenue is aspirational, but it's still like a work in progress. What is one tax decision that you would advise founders to be able to really focus on or prioritize during those first few years that can have a material effect in their exit strategy?
Yeah, I gotta say, like, based on the scenario described, like year 1 to 3, it's really never about any exotic tax loopholes. It's really about getting, all your equity share properly issued, and then have a clean book, clean financial. And then really what I said about own personal is really get those 83B election file, recognizing income early on when it's still less value, because you never know how fast it might appreciate, right? I have a client that came to me saying my company worth nothing, but 8 months later, someone buy it for 20 million. So you never know in today's world. So, get those 83B in there, recognizing when the value is zero. So when the 20 million milestone comes in, you're recognizing capital gain and everything when the timelines all meet up. So it's really getting those sort of timely and orderly things set up so you can focus on developing your product. And I cannot reiterate what Steve said, bringing extra helps. So, things that, only you can do, focus on those things the other can do, let them handle it and alleviate your stress and time so you can focus on your best time spent there. So it's really about just getting things in order, continue to grow your business. As long all your financials clean, have a good setup and good understanding what the next few year looks like. I think that's the best strategy, even for any purpose, not just tax.
Well, it is good to know that we're not missing out on some exotic, little described, little talked about tax law. So you've given us all a breath of relief to know we don't have to go worry about that today. And I think also just that clarity and that consistency of like clean cap tables. In some ways, like, oh yeah, of course. But on the other hand, it's so easy. I had a while ago in a different life, it feels like I was on the investor side. And one of my favorite comments that often would come from early stage investors is, how often common stock can be or options can be given out like they're candy, like Skittles, and you just forget to like track where all of it's going and like not realizing it has a dilutive effect in some ways on the actual business. But staying with the positive and sort of what I loved through that was, it's actually not rocket surgery. We can do this. You've got people around you that want to help, and you never know when that opportunity to exit is going to come through. So you do this, and you're going to be ready to really say, I can think about this offer when it comes. Cindy, on your side in these early years and knowing the importance of community connection, what is one strategy that you would advise founders to be thinking through that they can really take today that can get them more connected into the community that they want to invest in the future?
So can I give you two things instead
Oh,
of
of
one
course.
thing?
Yeah, we love two. Give us an A,
Okay.
B. We love it.
Okay, I'll give you two things. So one of the things I've learned over my life is that everything is time or money. And if you have more of one than the other, lean into that while you have that. So if you are building your business and money is not as much of a resource that you can invest into your community, think about time. And that can look in a number of ways. So how could you support the next entrepreneur that may have faced the same barriers and challenges that you have? How do you cultivate a community of strong business folks wherever you are, whether that's virtually or in your own community? How can you contribute to making business stronger and entrepreneurs stronger across your world? And that's a time thing, not a money thing. And so you can think about doing that. And I think that always has huge benefits. A friend of mine said once to me that your network is your net worth. And I believe that is very true. So how do you think about building your network so you have net worth in all of the best ways so that during and through all these transitions, you are well positioned to be the best person you want to be and have the opportunities that you're looking for. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of momentum around, which I find really exciting, is collective giving and collective impact investing. And so coming together with others, you do not have to write the largest check on the planet to be making an impact in a lot of these things. And who can you come together with, either through a pooled donor advised fund or some other vehicle like that, where you can come together with folks to create a meaningful impact. And we're seeing a lot of momentum in that space. And I think it's a really wonderful way to both create community and have positive impact.
I love that. All right, Cindy, I'm gonna stay there because we've talked so much goodness around like how do I action it? But do you actually have a favorite story maybe that you could share to personalize this on an entrepreneur that maybe did integrate time early on and how it helped them grow or find their next chapter of success when they exited their business? Any that come to mind as a favorite story to share?
Yeah, I have a couple. So I'm in Colorado, and so we have a very entrepreneurial ecosystem here, which is fantastic. So I have a couple, but I'll do one, so I'm not taking up too much time. But we have a person who worked in tech, and he was a founder from an underrepresented background, and he faced a lot of barriers and challenges in his time, both accessing capital, accessing the resources that he need. People didn't believe that he was going to be successful. A lot of the things that many of the folks on this call may be experiencing now. And what he did is he took those experiences, and it'll lead a little bit to what I was just talking about. And he has worked really hard to support other entrepreneurs on a similar journey. He actually even built an organization that does nothing but that here in Colorado that focuses on underrepresented founders in the tech space and really building an ecosystem that's supportive to them. I think the other really great thing, not only is that they built this amazing organization that is turning out even more effective and successful entrepreneurs, is that this has actually led him to his next idea for the next company that he's going to build. And I think that's really exciting, is that sticking true to his values, contributing to the community, is actually building out this next amazing thing, which I can't talk about, but it's going to be really cool for all of us here in Colorado. And then I think it's going to scale nationally. And so he's a wonderful example to me of someone who, again, baked in those values of if we all rise, we all rise. And he's just done that repeatedly throughout his career. And I think it has made him incredibly financially successful and someone who has earned a lot of respect and support from his community.
What an exceptional example. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know our founders will be cheering him on, not that he needs it.
Yes.
I'm certainly excited to see when it comes out. Hopefully you'll share with us when the time is right. Um, Steve, obviously, I'm sure probably like Cindy, you've got 1,000 amazing happy stories that you could lean into. But I'm going to ask today for one to just humanize us a little bit that maybe showcases what happens when wealth planning comes earlier to give more optionality or bounce back possibilities during volatility or times of uncertainty. How have you seen that show up for founders where wealth planning wasn't the last thought that entered their mind?
Yeah. Uh, and I've seen lots of those. I've mentioned earlier talking to people that have passed all their exits, but I've seen plenty where they're thoughtful years in advance, and it paid dividends. One was a software company I sold years ago, and it really had to do with building that team, and he could be gone. He could demonstrate that the team could run the business, and his employees were, as it is the case with many founders, more than just employees, right? These were a form of family. and had made commitments to several individually, but collectively they were going to get a percentage of any sale of the company. And that really not only benefited him well, so there was estate planning done and he got his residency right, and from a tax perspective it was beautiful. uh, but beyond that, it increased the value of the company by not by mitigating a big risk, I'll say, by having that team in place. And the culture of the company was such that you could tell it just permeated that we're in this together kind of a mentality, which again increased the value. Just thinking pragmatically, it increases the value of the business, it decreases the risk in it, and it increases the output that people were willing, and the passion that people had for their jobs. So, you know, having sold that business, I could tell you that the buyer universe thought about it differently. And he, from a tax perspective, did wonderful. And it only happened because he thought about this years in advance from a tax perspective, but also how he operated the business really then manifested itself in the sale of the business of what was actually being transacted. So it can happen, but it takes intentionality and time.
I love that. See, now that is what culture in my mind looks like, and also where values show up to really bring that forward. That's exciting. That's exciting. All right, Edmund, taxes. I know you probably got many examples where like sometimes it's a good thing when we talk taxes and it actually creates more wealth. I want to hear one of those stories. What's a favorite story of you when you think about, yeah, like early planning made a difference and this founder walked away with more impact able for themselves and for others as a result of that early planning coming together.
Yeah, love to share successful stories. I can just share one that's happened this week actually.
Oh,
This is a client for many years. He's very like entrepreneurial and he do a lot of investment product developments. Um, I mean, early on, he started just like earlier question with his LLC, and then we have early on discussion. What does that all mean in a few years when I want to sell my business? What would be the best benefit? So we kind of work with it early on what the goal and objective is, and then discussion, and we convert LC to C corp. We make all the elections on his personal side, and then start a QSBS clock. And along the way, there come VC fundraising, all those. So it's really great for, next 5, 6 years. And along the way, we also like, hey, you have QSB as stocks, individually you hold them, you entitled to your exclusion. But, he also have a growing family. He wants some, benefit for the kids. So we actually like advising him to stacking those QSBs instead of just your pocket. You can, give them to your kids for the benefit of them in a trust, and for the benefit of the kid, and you actually can split the pot instead of one 10 million exclusion, you get multiple 10 million exclusion. So we have all those set up early on. And then finally, like early this year, he entered a contract to sell his business. And then now I think he can exclude up to like, 50 million of the capital gain associated with business because QSBS. And then we look back, hey, you actually contribute IP in the beginning because the rule is either 10 million lifetime or 10 times the basis. So we went back and now try and do the study on the basis of the IP contributed. So we might even able to exclude more, but that's a pending item. So a lot of these is really sort of have early conversation early on, know what the objective is so we can plan early. So for successful story like this today to materialize, and a lot of time people say, oh, I can come to you for tax planning now. I'm 6 months out selling my business. Like, I think that's already too late. You don't start tax planning on exit. You start tax planning way early on so you can foresee what your exit is. And a lot of time when you do things planning in such short period of time, a lot of time I say you are really reassigning the economic or income from one taxpayer to another. So a lot of time they don't allow those transactions to happen when it's so close to the exit. So again, early on planning takes years of sort of, thinking and planning. And then when you finally have a successful story at the end, definitely you get a lot more tax benefit than if you would have done it in the first place.
I love that. Plus, I'll just go out on a limb and say having the three of you around is going to be like one of the most energizing experiences for founders because they're coming in and able to sort of share that vision of like this is what it's going to look like when I build that successful business. And this is where I'm heading for my next chapter. And you three are like, yes, let's get you there. Let's get you there with as much money and as much value alignment as we possibly can and make sure you have everything that you need for success so that you can focus on the growth and the build of the business in the day to day. But we'll have this telescoping opportunity to come back in, check in, and make sure that those goals are still aligned to the growth and the style of the business. So thank you for that. All right, I'm rapidly watching time fly. I knew this conversation was going to go that way. So I'm going to have to be swift and brief with selecting just a couple of last questions here. Steve, I'm going to come to you because everyone that knows me knows I'm like glass half full, Pollyanna style girl. But also, the reality is our founders have been on quite a few winters recently, meaning that it has been very hard for them to sort of figure out what is going on, what they can count on, where they can expect growth, where things are just beyond their control. How do you advise founders in uncertain times to stay like where is the focus best spent, knowing that there's so many unknowns in these moments as well? How do you guide people to sort of think through the uncertainty of future time and future planning with the realities of what we're all facing right now?
Yeah, I think the big picture is diversification wherever you can have it, whether it's customer base, supply base, sectors, not just one customer, but sector of customers. That will and focus where you can focus. Worry about what you can control. You could spend all day watching headlines and wonder what's going to impact you, but the whole time you're in a raft and you could be in a canoe. You put your paddle in the water, get the direction for the things that you can control. Diversification, again, customers, suppliers, employees, all of those things that you can do to mitigate the risk of your business, and plan for the opportunities, because tumult presents opportunity as well. At least it often can, so that when the tide comes back in, you have a stronger company. And it's times of struggle that really define the business. It gives you a chance to demonstrate who you are as a company and with your employees, but it also can be a time to really demonstrate that same thing to your customers, and you can deliver when you said you were going to deliver. It's why you have good relationships with your suppliers, so that like if there's a shock and all of a sudden you can't get a certain resource from one place, you need to get it from another. You've developed those relationships so that you can do it when the sun's not shining. That kind of diversification is what I would be focused on, and worrying about what you can control.
Fantastic. Diversification, control the controllable. We like those two very salient advices. Okay, here's my final question for all of you. And it's this one. If you could guide founders listening today to take one action, just one, in the next 12 months, what are you going to encourage them to do? Cindy, let's start with you. Then Edmund, I'm coming to you. And Steve, you're going to round us out. Cindy.
Yeah, I would write down those values and the things that are important to you and think very thoughtfully about how you incorporate those into every aspect of your business.
Amazing. Thank you. Edmund.
I think again, focus on the thing that is most important to you. Spend your time on the most important thing that can grow your business, and let other handle the thing that other can do. So, so you can plan out the next 12 months.
I love that. Steve.
I would do what they said. Honestly, those are two spectacular answers. And if you can start with your goals and augment your team, whether it's employees or consultants, advisors, focus on your long-term vision and worry about executing what you can control and influence. That's the best advice that I can give.
That is great advice. And Steve, I'm going to steal your word and say spectacular answers all around. Friends, I have thoroughly enjoyed this hour. I feel so much more knowledgeable, so much more sure of asking for early conversations with incredible advisors like all of you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your generosity. We couldn't have done it without you. So we really do appreciate your support and advocacy of all the amazing entrepreneurs out in the world. Thank you for making it brighter for all of them. And Colin, back to you to close this out.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Nicola, and thank you, Steve, Cindy, and Edmund, for sharing all of the advice and making it easy to understand. Many people in the chat were saying that. So thank you all and hope we can stay in touch. For everyone still on the call, we have a lot of webinars coming up on the horizon, so check those out in the chat. And we look forward to welcoming you all back online soon. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you very much.